Gaia the Techtonic is a mage legendary. 8 mana 5/7 mech with colossal +2. After friendly mech attacks, deal 1 damage to all enemies. And it summons 2 copies of Gaia's Drill, which is a 2/3 mech with rush. So on its own, this is 8 mana 5/7, deal 2 to all enemies, and then you can deal 2 more times. So you can kill like 2 4 health things or 1 6 health thing, as well as the 2 damage AoE. On its own, I would say that's not really impactful enough to AoE at that stage in the game, is just not that impressive. Although certainly, I mean, if there's like a Glowfly Swarm meta or something like that, maybe it could be useful, but turn 8 for that effect seems a little bit slow. So I think you probably do need some more mechs to support this. Like, maybe on its own it'll be fine sometimes, but you need to sometimes have a mech that's sticking to the board that can give you a little bit more damage off this. But currently, at least, the mech pool is pretty terrible, so I can't imagine this seeing play. Mage has gotten at least one other mech in this set, and, you know, probably a good chance that we'll get, like, Snow Chugger in the core set or something. But even with that, as of right now, I feel like this card doesn't have enough support. Probably just costs a little bit too much for what it does. Next up, we have a Warlock Legendary, Gigafin. 8 mana 7/4 Murloc with Colossal +1. Battlecry, devour all enemy minions. Death Rattle, spit them back out. And the token you summon is Gigafin's Maw, a 4/7 Murloc with Taunt, and Death Rattle permanently destroy all minions inside Gigafin. So the idea is that the Gigafin kills everything, and then they have to get through the Taunt to get to Gigafin. So if they have to kill Gigafin with minion damage, they're not going to get their board back. But if they can kill it with a spell, which I would imagine is probably not that hard since it has 4 health and you're playing an 8 mana board clear, like any matchup where an 8 mana board clear is going to be relevant, I have to imagine they're usually going to have 4 damage from a spell. But it does still deal with their board for a turn. It is still, what, 11/11 worth of stats. Kind of a powerful effect. In theory, you could kill your own Gigafin's Maw with, we have like Grimoire of Sacrifice. But I think spending a card to kill your own 4/7 is probably too much work. Like at that point, just play Twisting Nether if you want to clear the board. So I don't think that's really a thing. Also, this is a Murloc, but it doesn't really seem to make too much sense in Murloc decks. We did get the new Murloc Dredge card that could potentially be pretty good with this. But I think the deck that wants to play that card is pretty unhappy to ever draw Gigafin unless it's specifically off of the Dredge Murloc. So I don't know if it really makes too much sense. And overall, I'm just not really sure that this card makes too much sense. I don't know. Warlock has other board clears. Seems like it's not too hard for the opponent to deal with. Doesn't make too much sense as a Murloc, but I don't know. It's not like awful. Maybe it could shine in some matchups. It's also like pretty good against buffs, I should mention. Bad against Death Rattles, so that's the buffs versus Death Rattles is probably going to be the big point of contention on how viable it is. But it looks like maybe Paladin is pushing some buff stuff, so maybe this card is just a good answer to Paladin. And Paladin, even late game Paladin decks, actually don't tend to have very good ways to deal like 4 spell damage. So maybe a good anti-Paladin card or something. Next up, we have Nellie the Great Thresher, a warrior legendary. 7 mana 5/5 beast with Colossal +1. Battlecry, discover 3 pirates to crew Nellie's ship. And then Nellie's ship is a 2/6 beast with Taunt. And Death Rattle, add Nellie's pirate crew to your hand. They cost 1. So you discover the pirates with Nellie, but you have to wait for the ship to die to actually add them to your hand. But then when you do add them to your hand, they all cost 1 mana, which is pretty good. Most pirates obviously cost more than 1 mana, so they're going to be discounted. And it's worth noting that one of those pirates can be Mr. Smite. You cannot get multiple copies of the same pirate, but you can get a Mr. Smite and then 2 other 1 mana pirates. and maybe that deals like 14 damage or something. Circus Amalgam is rotating, but maybe like a South Sea Captain, that'd be like 15 damage, right? Or even if you don't hit Mr. Smite, you can just have Mr. Smite, and then that's a 9 mana combo, 6 mana Mr. Smite, plus 3 1 mana pirates. Pretty good finishing potential, as well as a lot of value in this card. And the body on the card itself is like pretty good as well. What, 7, 11 worth of stats, a little bit of taunt. Not insane, but I think the death rattle on the pirate ship might justify it. It's also really good with Raid the Docks. Most Raid the Docks decks have tried to just complete the quest as soon as possible. But I think if maybe Control Warrior just wants to play the Juggernaut as a late game win condition, then Nellie would help with that a lot. Chances are up to this point you can just play a few pirates here and there. And then Nellie will give you 3 pirates in one go. You play Nellie on 7, and then turn 8, you can play 3 1-mana pirates plus Captain Rakara. And that's especially good if one of those 1-mana pirates is Mr. Smite, because then you can charge the Captain Rakara. And also Raid the Docks is getting a few more 2-mana pirates in this set, so that could be pretty good. I do think that if Pirate Warrior just wants to complete the quest as soon as possible, Nellie is probably too slow. But I think in a Control Warrior, a pirate package with Nellie probably makes some sense. Next up, Druid Legendary, Hedra the Heretic, 7 mana 4/5 Naga, with Battlecry. For each spell you've cast while holding this, summon a minion of that spell's cost. So definitely a pretty powerful effect on this card, but it is a little bit weird because, I mean, it does have to be in your hand to get to like juice the effect on it. And this is a 7 mana card, so like you don't want to keep it off the mulligan, and to get like big value out of it, to be playing, you know, big druid spells that cost 6, 7 mana, it's going to take a long time to like have this in your hand and then cast, you know, a couple 6 mana spells, a couple 7 mana spells, and just, that's a lot of mana that you have to sink into this card. And then even after you sink the mana into this card, then, you know, Twisting Nether or something can just kind of ruin your day. But it is still a board in a box, and those cards tend to be pretty good. It does get dealt with by an AoE, but it also forces an AoE, and if they don't have the AoE, then they just die. I think the big problem of having to have this card in your hand is a little bit offset, because there's a card that we're going to look at, probably not in this video, but tomorrow maybe, that draws a Naga, and this is a Naga. So you can probably just draw this card pretty consistently. You also like don't have to cast this with a bunch of big spells, but I think if this is summoning just like a bunch of 3 mana minions, it's probably just not quite enough of a threat, especially since you're probably not actually playing it on turn 7. I feel like this is a 7 mana card, but oftentimes it's going to be more like a 10 mana card. But also maybe you can just have some ridiculous ramp curve into it, like coin Wild Growth into probably another ramp card will exist, and then play a couple other spells leading up to this, and then turn like 4 or 5 effectively you get to play this and have a big board. That could potentially be really good. But I mean, we're missing Overgrowth going forward, so it's hard to say like how reasonable that'll be. I think the biggest problem with this card though is for a slow win condition, like maybe you would rather just play Kazakhstan. Druid has already shown that they are very good at using this card, and it wins games on its own already, so I don't know if you need another late game bomb. But, I mean, maybe saying Kazakhstan is better is a bit of a cop-out, because they're not going to let Kazakhstan just take over an entire expansion with all the like big value cards they're printing. So like even if Kazakhstan is better, maybe it gets nerfed or something, I don't know. But yeah, this Druid Legendary is fine, I would say. And next we have Miracle Growth, some fuel for the Druid Legendary. 7 mana nature spell that says draw 3 cards, summon a plant with taunt, and stats equal to your hand size. So you draw 3, and then you probably make like a 7/7 taunt or an 8/8 taunt or something like that, which is pretty good. Druid in the past has played some very expensive card draw cards, and they've had ramp and stuff to make those cards playable, but one of the drawbacks with something like an overflow is sometimes you die if you draw cards. But this giving you a big taunt to protect you, that helps a lot. Getting a big taunt so you can actually afford to draw the cards. This card, I mean, I'm kind of sounding like a broken record talking about what ramp is going to be available every time I talk about a Druid card, but I do think it's very important with a card like this, because being able to ramp into that card draw and then draw the cards to make up for spending the cards on the ramp is pretty important. If there's like no ramp, this card is probably just too slow, but it does still summon a giant thing either way. Next we have the Garden's Grace for Paladin. 10 mana holy spell. Give a minion +5/+5, and Divine Shield costs 1 less for each mana you've spent on holy spells this game. So in theory, 0 mana gives something 5/5 and Divine Shield. We saw the Paladin Legendary in the previous video that would really benefit from this. Then you can, for 0 mana, give 2 things +5/+5 and Divine Shield. But it does take a while to discount, and I think you do need to discount this. Compare this to Pharaoh's Blessing. Yeah, 6 mana, gives something 4/4 Divine Shield and Taunt. This card was not really ever very good, so I think for Garden's Grace you need it to cost, like, even at 5 I'm not super excited for it. But once it gets down to like 4 mana, then I think this card looks pretty nice. But yeah, that's a lot of holy spells you're gonna have to invest into this card. And as we've mentioned, Hand of Adal, Librum of Wisdom, Librum of Hope, Blessing of Authority, those are all rotating. So that's definitely a hit to the pool of holy spells. But unlike the card that only cares about buffing holy spells, we can still play this with like Consecration. And we do still have Blessing of Kings, Hold the Bridge, and Conviction. We've got some Paladin Secrets. And we have there's another like 7 mana holy spell that I think we'll be looking at in the next video. So it's probably not too hard to discount this. And worth noting, after you play the first copy of this, the second copy is always 0, because whatever mana you would have left to spend on holy spells, you spend on the first copy. So second copy is always 0, which is kind of a nice interaction. But even if we do have a decent number of holy spells, it does still take a while to play, say, 5 or 6 mana worth of holy spells. And you're playing all those spells, but you also have to have a minion in play to actually target with this card. So it's pretty slow, and it's also like not defensive. It doesn't give your thing taunt or whatever, it just gives it Divine Shield. But of course you can always just play it on something that has taunt already. But yeah, slow, requires a lot of investment, but if you can manage to put in that investment, it's certainly a powerful effect. Cards that do basically anything significant that can be discounted to 0 mana tend to be pretty strong. And this card for 0 mana would be very, very strong. And finally, we have Amalgam of the Deep, a neutral Amalgam minion, 2 mana, 2/3, with Battlecry, choose a friendly minion, discover a minion of the same type. So River Croc with a lot of upside. Seems like a pretty solid card. I mean, if you're playing a tribal deck, then probably pretty happy to play this in that tribal deck. One of the things you're going to be looking out for this card are relevant tribal 1-mana minions, because you do want to be able to play this card kind of like Crackling Razor Maw. Back in the day, you wanted to go Dire Mole into Crackling Razor Maw. Now you want to go Kindling Elemental into Amalgam of the Deep, I guess. But it is value and not tempo, which definitely makes it worse than something like Crackling Razor Maw. And similar to the Crackling Razor Maw, sometimes it's just going to be a 2 mana 2/3 or 2 mana 3/2. You do actually need something in play to target with this. And I think since it's just value, it's not really helping you snowball the game at all. I think that is a pretty significant drawback on this card that might even stop it from seeing a lot of play. Because it's situational, right? When you're playing an aggressive deck, you don't want to have something in play. especially something specific. Because as an aggro deck, you're probably still going to be playing like Iron Deep Trog and, I don't know, maybe like Peasant or something. And those aren't good enough for Amalgam of the Deep. You need to have specifically like a Murloc Tidecaller or something. So, I don't know, I do think it's a little bit clunky. But just as a 2-mana 2/3 for a tribe, like that's probably good enough for a Murloc. And it's maybe even good enough for a pirate if you're just going for the super aggressive, complete raid the docks as fast as possible game plan. So there definitely are some tribes, some minion types that would be interested in this card, and I would be shocked if it ends up not seeing any play. But I don't think that you necessarily put this in like every deck that's playing a handful of beasts or something like that. Because at the end of the day, it's just a value card that can whiff. And like aggressive decks aren't playing like Pandaren Importer or something. Because they just don't care that much about the value, they care about the tempo. But if you play a deck that has like 25 Murlocs in it, then it's obviously going to hit more than it's going to miss.